On the annual 4th of Memorial Day. I needed a sip of water, too chatty. So, I feel like saga is like an aggressive word. There is a second book in this series as well called, hold on, that's not what it's called. Behind the Booktube. Like, how do I talk about this? It's not my typical dark and messed up thriller. Hi everybody, it's Audrey and welcome back to Chapter and Converse and welcome to part 2 of what I read in July. So, even more belated than the last video of part 1. So if you guys didn't see part 1, I will of course link it down below for you. And today we're going to dive into part 2, obviously, because that's the name of the video. Man, it's been a day. So, 5 books to talk about. Overall, I had a very good reading month. I read a lot of new releases and then I read some new to me books. Although I think they were all new releases, with the exception of one. All right, let's just dive into the first one. So the first book I have is The Block Party. This is by Jamie Day. So this ARC was sent to me by St. Martin's, and this is like the real, so it has like an ARC cover, and then the real cover, which maybe you'll recognize it from that. So this 1000% has a Desperate Housewives vibe to it, which if you guys saw part 1 of this video when I was talking about the May Cobb book, which is next to me because I am 1000% filming this on the same day. Behind the Booktube, but it has a Desperate Housewife vibe to it, and I just love that. That is such a buzz phrase for me. I just love the soapy suburban neighborhood drama of it all. So I have talked about a handful of these books in a recent book haul, like the last one you guys probably would have seen. So this is the book that I talked about where I was like, when I moved to the suburbs, I dreamed of living on a Wisteria Lane type of a place and having all the drama. And sadly for me, it never happened. So I have to vicariously live through the Wisteria Lanes of the books. So in this book, we are opening up present day Memorial Day. And this cul-de-sac has a block party every Memorial Day. And we know something goes horribly, horribly wrong. So there are police sirens, there's something went down, and then in one of my other favorite things in a book, we go backwards a year to the block party the year before, and we re-meet all of our castmates, and we see how we got to where we got to today. So in this one, we actually get some multiple POVs. So we get Letty, who is the teenage daughter of our main character, Alex Fox. And this takes place in Massachusetts, which I also love. It's not quite Boston, but works for me. And we get to see kind of the new neighbors who moved to town. We get to see the neighbors who've been there for a while. Alex's sister lives on the street. Husbands, kids, complicated relationships between the people in the neighborhood. Some mutual enemies of people in the neighborhood. And I just had such a fun time with this. So it's, you know, a whodunit, who's done. And it's like, it's one of those books where like it could be anyone. So anyone could be the victim, anyone could be the killer, and I would have been thoroughly like happy with all of it. So there's actually some weightiness to this as well, but there's a lot of different storylines, not in the sense that it's hard to keep up with in any kind of a way. And then interjected between the different POVs, we also get Meadowbrook is the name of the town. We get the Meadowbrook online community page, which is kind of like a next door app. So there are the people outside of the cul-de-sac who know all about this bougie part of town, who have all sorts of thoughts, feelings, and opinions, and they chime in kind of like our Greek chorus. And I just thought it was really well done. So there's parts that are humorous, there's parts that are a little bit uncomfortable and cringy because it does get a little bit dark and messy in some areas, but you guys know me. I love the dark and messed up. I flew through this book real quickly. I was very, very jazzed about getting this one, and there's just a lot of suspects, but someday we want to live on a tight-knit street where everybody knows each other. And I don't know, I just thought it was so much fun. So a great summer read, but obviously a great read any time of year. And I just thought it was great. I thought it was absolutely great. And I also just love, and again, very much kind of like reminds me of like season 1 of Desperate Housewives, where everybody's kind of watching each other. Everybody knows everything about each other, but you don't quite know everything about each other. And you're making assumptions about your neighbors. And, you know, it's like everybody's got a secret. Everybody's trying to hide something. And it's just like delicious, bingeable fun. loved it. I loved it, I loved it, I loved it. Okay, so if you're looking for a little bit of romance, I have Same Time Next Summer by Annabelle Monaghan. So she wrote the book Nora Goes Off Script, which I hadn't read, but I promptly purchased after I read this. So this was the book club for Bad on Paper in July. Yes, which is why I picked it up. Just double checking. And this is a second chance romance. So I feel like sort of in the vein of Every Summer After by Carly Fortune, but also sort of different. But I think if you liked Every Summer After, this might be a good go-to for you. This is a closed door romance. So Every Summer After, we do get to open the door a bit, which I enjoyed. This is a closed door, and we are following, I'm like waving the book in front of my face. So Sam, her life is perfectly on track. So she has a doctor fiance. They have some strict routines. They've got some stuff cooking for them. They're getting married. All is well in the world. So they wind up going out to Montauk for a week, which Sam's parents have a house out there. So she grew up in New York City, and they're going to spend a week out there. They're going to look at a wedding venue. Her parents think possibly get married out there. Jack's parents are a little more like, let's get married in Connecticut kind of a thing. So Sam and Jack are really going out there to humor her parents. Her parents are definitely on the more eccentric side, and they live a very cool kind of maybe borderline hippie-ish, beachy kind of a life. And Sam has not really been back there much. So they spend a lot of their time in the city with her parents, but kind of like when they are out on the beach, they kind of become totally different people and are much more in their element out there. So many years ago growing up, the boy next door to their beach house was Sam's first love. And she hasn't seen him in forever. He left right before he went to college, and that was kind of the last time they saw each other. So kind of similar to Every Summer After. But every summer before, they had this great romance and this great friendship. And sure enough, Sam goes back for this week, and guess who's there? The boy next door, whose name is Wyatt. So we get to meet them in past timelines as teenagers as they fall in love with each other, and then we get to see the somewhat complicated dynamic of them in the present. So I just thought it was really fun. I had a really good time with this. I enjoyed a lot. I talked about in part one how I read The Girl I Was by Geneva Rose, and how much I love that kind of going back and the magic dream of being able to revisit your past. Like if your present self could tell your past self certain things, and if you knew then what you know now type of a thing. One of my other favorite kind of book ideas is someone who is at a crossroads in their life, and Sam thinks she's got everything on track and she knows what's going on, and then poof, here comes Wyatt to bring back her entire past and all those memories and the girl she was back then and who she is now, and kind of reassessing her life. So I really enjoyed it. And without getting into any spoilers for any books, I know that there were elements that some people didn't like in Every Summer After, and those elements do not exist in this book. I don't know if that's vague. I also know some people didn't enjoy what some people dubbed was like the YA timeline in Every Summer After. I loved everything about that book. I cannot wait to see. Did you guys see? It's coming to Netflix, and Harry and Meghan's production company is the one behind it, which I talked about in part one, how like, yay Geneva Rose, she just got like this amazing, I think 7-figure 2-book deal. Yay for Carly Fortune, you talk about a dream, her debut novel that got so many accolades. So anyway, nothing to do with anything, but this was a great book. And I think if you, whether it's like a palate cleanser or you're just looking for a closed door romance, if that's more your speed, you can definitely get all of that here. And then there is a Q&A with Annabelle Monaghan in the back. And I actually like flag stuff from the Q&A with her. And she just talks a lot about like what inspired the story, but there were some great quotes in this. It definitely, I'm pretty much a weepy person when it comes to books, but no spoiler to tell you guys I cried when I read this. And I loved it. I love the family dynamic. Sam's brother is out there as well with his husband or his boyfriend. And I just loved the whole dynamic between all of them. And then I love the past timeline of Wyatt and his whole family next door. So I just thought it was great fun. So it's sweet. It's cute. I enjoyed it. Okay, another book that takes us back to the dark side of things. This is Gone Tonight by Sarah Pekkanen. This is the arc that I got from St. Martin's, which, thank you again, St. Martin's. Very jazzed about this one. So I have read everything that Sarah Pekkanen and Greer Hendricks have done together, but this is my first Sarah Pekkanen solo writing dip that I took. And this is kind of a very interesting twist on the mother-daughter story. So you can see I dog-eared up a storm when I read this book. And this is about Ruth and her daughter Caroline. So we are meeting Ruth when she's 41 years old. She is a single mom. She has always raised Catherine on her own. She got pregnant when she was in high school and had to basically flee town. So she has been on her own ever since. She has had no support from her family or anything. And she has raised Catherine. So Catherine is now 24. And she is about to head off to Johns Hopkins. They are in, I want to say they're in Pennsylvania. And she's getting ready to go work at Johns Hopkins. She has been a nurse for patients with Alzheimer's, for senior living. And Ruth basically doesn't want her daughter to leave her. It's always been the two of them. And she is going to kind of stop at nothing to make sure her daughter doesn't leave. And Catherine has always known her mother's story. She's known a lot about her mom, but she's starting to kind of question some things that are rising. Like, how do I talk about this? As Ruth doesn't want her to leave. So when I say it's sort of a twist on the mother-daughter, I always feel like a lot of these books, like the mom is blind to what the daughter is doing, the mom is clueless to what the child is doing, the mom is the one who's got secrets being kept from her. But in this one, Catherine is the one sort of investigating her mom and trying to figure out what's really going on. So this is another one of those books where it's like everybody's got secrets, everybody's got like lies, and there's deception. We get multiple timelines in this. We get both of the POVs. And this is one of those books where I can't say it because it spoils up a storm, but there is something in this book that is one of my favorite things that can happen in a book. And I was really happy with it. So I think if you're used to Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen's writing, you will definitely enjoy this one. It's very much on par, I would say, with the books that they've written together. And it's just really complicated family relationships. I think sort of that what would you do for your family, what would you do for your child, kind of that kind of a theme, the lengths that you would go to for the people that you love. And, you know, the investigation into like everything you thought you knew might not be what it actually is. So kind of the curtain getting peeled back. And this one has the line on the back which says, "Who does the darkness lie within?" Which I said it when I hauled this book the first time. I loved that line alone because you know I love dark and messed up. So you definitely get dark and messed up in this book. The next book I also did on audio, and this is The Marlow Murder Club by Robert Thorogood. So I actually do own this, but I have lent it to my dad, so it's in his hands right now. And the audiobook narrator is Nicolette McKenzie. So this book is one that I have embarrassingly had on my shelves for far too long, and I really enjoyed this. This is another kind of palate cleanser-y kind of a book. And I think kind of this books with like women of a certain age. So I have Killers of a Certain Age, which I still need to read. And I have The Thursday Murder Club, which I still need to read. So like kind of all in that vein. So in this one, we are following a woman named Judith Potts. She is 77 and she is blissfully happy. So it says, to solve an impossible murder, you need an impossible hero. So Judith lives in this big mansion just outside of Marlow, which is a real town. And she is having a swim in the Thames one night, as one apparently does. And she winds up hearing her neighbor get murdered, or so she believes. And she reports this to the police, but of course they don't believe her. They're not finding a body. They are completely disregarding her because, of course, she's a 77-year-old woman, so what could she possibly know? So she decides to investigate on her own. And this is not a spoiler, this is set up. You know, when the body shows up, all of a sudden it's, you know, whodunit, what happened? She is committed to finding out what happened, and she starts her own investigation. And along the way, she makes some friends with some other people, And it's this group of women who come together and sort of unofficially form this Marlow murder club and try to solve the murder and what happened. So there's definitely like a bit of a Miss Marple element to this in some ways. It's definitely a bit on the cozy side. There's some great, great, great humor to this. The wit, the humor, the banter between these characters is so spot on. There's a little bit of hijinks. I almost feel like if Finley Donovan and Vero were in their 70s, this could very easily be them many, many books from now. So kind of like in that like similar vibe, and just so many characters. Everybody's a suspect. It has that small town, even kind of like Anthony Horowitz Magpie Murders feel to it. So like the story within the story of Magpie Murders, it's all there, just like primed for the taking. And I did see that this is actually being made into a BBC/PBS miniseries like Magpie Murders was, which I'm super excited about. There is a second book in this series as well called, hold on, that's not what it's called Death Comes to Marlow. So there's 2 books in the series right now, but I just really loved it. And I really enjoyed this perspective of these women. And I'm not 77 yet, but someday. But the idea and the concept and the commentary about as women get older and become more invisible and become disregarded, and especially, like I say, women of a certain age, and how so many people are sort of poo-pooing her and dismissing her. And she is a force to be reckoned with, as are her friends. And she just has this great group of friends that come along. And I just loved it. I just thought it was such great fun. So definitely, I think if you are enjoying, like I said, like the Miss Marples, the Anthony Horowitz, Thursday Murder Club, which I haven't read yet, and just the whole idea of just stories about people who aren't just in their 20s, which I love me a YA book. You guys know that. But I'm having a really good time with some of these books as well. And it's just fun. And I feel like British humor is always completely on point. And it just was super enjoyable. So highly recommend it. And then she writes crosswords for the Times, which is why the cover of the book looks like a crossword puzzle. So she's very smart. She's very crafty. She's very witty. I'm a very big fan of Judith Potts. And I'm excited to see what she gets up to in the next one. But if you haven't checked this out, I would recommend it. And then the last book I read is The Connellys of County Down by Tracy Lang. So I actually had the e-arc of this, and I had the audio arc of this. So this was read by Barrie Kreinik, and this is the same author who wrote We Are the Brennans, who, if you have been here for a minute, you know I was obsessed with that book. I am still obsessed with that book. I loved it so much. So The Connellys of County Down takes place in the same universe as Brennans, in that we get a couple little winks to that book and that family, but they are in no way, you don't need to read one before the other or read one or the other, but I would highly recommend you read We Are the Brennans because it's really, really good. But in this book, we get another Irish family, the dynamics of their family, the complications of their family, and it's another, I feel like saga is like an aggressive word, but it's sort of a family drama saga-ish type of a book. So in this one, we are meeting Tara Connelly. When we first meet her, she is just getting released from prison after spending 18 months in jail for a drug charge. So she is being released. She is going to live with her older brother and her older sister. So Geraldine is the oldest, and then Eddie is the middle child, her brother, and then he is a single dad raising his son Connor, who I want to say is like 10-ish. And they're all living together in their parents' old house. So their mom did pass away when they were younger. Their dad is kind of out of the picture. And we get to see this dynamic between the 3 of them. So Geraldine has sort of been forced into the mom role when they were younger, once their mom got sick. And they all kind of fall into the same pattern of how they always were when they were younger. And everyone has got some stuff going on. So everyone has their own baggage, everyone has their own story. And for Tara, who is our main character, we are seeing her, she used to be a school teacher. She obviously has a felony now. She can't go back to being a teacher anymore. She doesn't have any money. She doesn't have a job. And she's trying to rebuild her life. So on top of all of this, we also have the detective who arrested Tara. And he kind of never really believed her story that put her into jail. So he's kind of sniffing around, hoping she might lead him somewhere. So there's a little bit of a mystery to it, but it's not a mystery novel. It's not my typical dark and messed up thriller, but there is a lot of, I would say, kind of like dark and messed up family stuff to this book. So the first thing I did want to mention is, so it's called The Connellys of County Down. This does not take place in Ireland. This actually takes place, like I said, in the same universe as We Are the Brennans. So this takes place in a New York suburb. It's actually Portchester, New York, and it is where my grandparents met and lived. They lived there their entire marriage. My mom grew up there, so I have like such a sentimental connection to that when I saw it. And what's also really interesting is the book talks a lot about how that town has changed and like its proximity to the city and people commuting in and out, and how the town has changed, how, you know, sort of affluence around it and how it doesn't always bleed into Portchester, and how the community has changed so much. So that part just was very personally interesting to me. But seeing how this family is interacting, seeing how Tara is trying to rebuild her life, and really complex dynamics between the family. So I would say We Are the Brennans is still my favorite of the two. I didn't connect with this on as emotional of a level as I did with that book, but I still very much enjoyed it. And I think it's well written. Tracy Lang has a really good writing style that I enjoy, and I think she does a really good job of exploring the complications of the family dynamic. I should also say the title of this book, The Connellys of County Down, does have significance, so you just need to read the book to find out what it is. So it didn't totally come out of left field, but I know when some people saw that, they did think it was set in Ireland. But I think she does a really good job of displaying doesn't sound like the right word, of portraying, there's a word, portraying the complicated relationships of family and between siblings. And I think, like I said, you know, a lot of the times with the family dynamic, in my experience, you fall back into who you were at a certain point, especially like from a child standpoint. And I know sometimes that can happen in my family, you know, like everyone just sort of falls back into how things were way back when. And I do think it's also hard a lot of times, and I find this even with friendships too, for if it's people you've known for a long time, it's hard to see people beyond a certain time when you knew them. So maybe you knew them as a high school student, or maybe you knew them from college, and to see you 10, 20 years later, it's hard to like unsee what used to be there, if that makes sense. I feel like I'm talking cryptically, but I also don't want to give anything away. There's a lot of reveals in this. I was actually listening to a podcast interview with Tracy Lang just the other day, and the interviewer, well, it was a very good interview, definitely gave away a lot of stuff. Had I not read the book, I would have been like, oh, like there's a lot of reveals. And I feel like she was trying to talk around it, but was still giving so much away. So I don't want to talk about any of it. But I think if you like family dramas, I think if you like kind of like a redemption story in some ways, and then a little bit of mystery, or if you just have a soft spot for New York, then maybe all these things combined will work for you. But I did very much enjoy it. And the one thing I did want to mention about this interview that I was listening to, and I can link it down below for you guys, is she said that her next book is already done. So there was a 2-year gap between this and Brennan's, but there's going to be another one coming out in 2024, which I'm excited about. So I will definitely follow her. I will continue to read whatever she puts out. And I had a good time with it. So very grateful for the arc of this one as well. And not a bad way to end the month. So there you go. That was everything I read in July. Needed a sip of water, talking way too much, so that means it's time for me to go. But let me know, now that you know everything I read in July, if any of these were books that you guys have read, what your favorite was. I have no idea what video I'm gonna film next, so whenever I figure out what that is, you guys will be the first to see it. And until then, I hope everyone is doing great. I hope everyone's enjoying the rest of, I'm one of these people who considers summer done Labor Day. I know that's not really true, but I'm just gonna wish everybody a great rest of the summer. I'm gonna see you before Labor Day, but anyway, for the purposes of this video, I've lost my mind. Thank you guys so much for being here, and I will see you in the next one, whenever that is. All right, bye guys.